So, why are there 1,369 light bulbs in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man? As the book opens, we find our narrator sitting in a room, ceiling and walls wired with light bulbs, 1,369 of them to be precise. When I first read the book, I tripped over that number, 1,369. It bothered me. I loved the book, and I had read it closely. Ellison wasn't arbitrary about anything. The number had to mean something. So I spent dozens of hours trying to figure it out. On this video, I've broken it into clues so you can look for the answer yourself. You can pause the video after each clue if you want to follow that path, or you can watch the whole video nonstop to get the answer. Clue number 1. 1,369 is the square of 37. It might be other things, but that stood out to me. 37 times 37. This can also be described as 37 raised to the second power. Our narrator, the protagonist, is underground, lighting his hole with electricity stolen from monopolated light and power. So why would something raised to the power of 2 or something squared be important? And why 37? Clue number 2. Armed with 37, I began hunting throughout the book. What could the numbers represent? Was it in the characters that he met, something that someone said, a set of things in the book? I looked everywhere. Then I thought about Ellison, the author. How old was he when he finished the book? Ellison said he was born March 1st, 1914. As a side note, his biographer suggests there's some evidence he was born a year earlier, in 1913. The book was published in 1952. That meant he was around 38 years old at publication, close enough to keep digging. When did he finish writing it? From his biography, it looks like writing was completed late in 1951, probably October. Using Ellison's accounting of his age, that would have made him 37 years old. Clue number 3. What about the narrator's age? There's one subtle clue early in the book. Chapter 1 begins, "It goes a long way back, some 20 years. He's looking back at his high school year where he's preparing to deliver a graduation speech. Assume he's 17 at graduation, add the 20 years, and he's 37. So maybe the narrator and Ellison are both 37 as the story is being told. If age connects the writer and the narrator, what else might that tell us? Does Ellison, the writer, get freed by the narrator's story, or does the narrator's story free Ellison in some way? Clue number 4. So maybe they are both acting as narrator and author. Somehow that multiplies or squares their ages, raises 37 to the second power. But then I wondered, wait, did the narrator ever actually write anything in the novel? Was he ever an author? I combed back through the book to find things the narrator wrote. There were references to things being written down, but no words that the reader actually gets to see. Wait, there is one. There's one moment that our narrator writes something and we get to see the words. Can you find it? The narrator's one message to us is written in purple lipstick. Yep, his only written artifact is drafted on a woman's stomach in chapter 24. I stared at that page for minutes, and maybe you should pause and do that too. I started to count the letters. In a drunken inspiration, he writes the only letters of his that we'll see, 37 of them. The narrator, who has spent most of his life as an orator, becomes a writer. Using 37 letters, Ellison and the narrator drop a hint that this is important. Clue number 5. 37 squared, 37 raised to the second power, 37 times 37. There's something about the self-reflection gained through writing the novel that gave Ellison a new perspective on himself, a second dimension. Just like squaring a number gives it a second dimension. The narrator has the same experience. By retelling his story, putting it all down, he's changed. The light bulbs in his hole are on the ceiling, but he's also beginning to wire the walls. With light from all angles, there are no longer shadows of his form. Through the writing, the retelling, he can finally see himself. He's no longer invisible. Clue number 6. There are a few other places in the novel where the text is center justified, all caps, similar to when he writes on Sybil's stomach. The ones that stand out are in these chapters, 10, 21, 23. Find them and see if you notice a pattern among them. First off, these are all physical signs. 2 of them are electric signs powered like a light bulb. The other one seems more handmade, black bordered. While they have different messages, the signs have one thing in common. They all have exactly 32 letters. Yeah, that seemed weird to me too. If 37 is his age when he finishes writing the novel, and somehow connects Ellison and the narrator after they've told their story, what might 32 represent? Digging through his biography, it turns out that Ellison began writing Invisible Man in the summer of 1945, when he was 32 years old. So maybe all these 32 letter signs signal the narrator's limited perception before he retells his story. The signs represent messages that are political, promotional, commercial, and activist. That's pretty similar to the narrator's life as a public speaker. For most of the book, he's an orator, telling people what they want to hear. He's recognized for that. Maybe Ellison's connecting the orator to these illuminated signs. After he retells his story through writing, things change. The very act of trying to put it all down gives him a new perception. With the lipstick message, Ellison is telling us that the act of writing changed him. The message is not a 32-letter sign or a rhetorical speech, but a 37-letter creation of his own. Clue number 7. The scholar Arnold Rampersad wrote an amazing biography of Ellison. I got to meet him once, and we talked briefly about the light bulbs. He did not immediately run away. While reading the biography, I began to play the numbers again. Ralph's father, Louis Alfred Ellison, was born in 1877. If you use the 1914 date of Ralph's birth, how old would his father have been when Ralph was born? Louis Alfred Ellison was probably 37. Epilogue. The narrator becomes a writer with his 37-letter lipstick message. Ellison begins his life at 37 when he finishes writing the book and finishes retelling the narrator's story along with his own. They are both made visible through that dual retelling. Before that, I lived in the darkness into which I was chased, but now I see. I have illuminated the blackness of my invisibility, and vice versa. Instead of being powered by monopolated power and light, one power, they are illuminated by each other. They're dual stories. They multiply each other, and like their age, are raised to the second power. The narrator is explicit that light gives birth to his form, and Ellison uses the number and the light bulbs to connect that to writing and creativity. Concluding, he says he's ready to come out of his hole. It's a rebirth of sorts, and perhaps that makes the light bulbs, the filament type, his birthday candles. Lastly, I think Ellison would have been struck by the perfection of his father's age being 37 at his birth, and Ellison's own age of 37 when he's reborn as a writer. Perhaps that's why he took the artistic license to claim 1914 as his birth year, despite some evidence to the contrary.